This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. So I really like the Gamecube controller, just the form factor and everything, and I do tend to take a look at a bunch of different Switch controllers at times online, and a lot of you guys will send me controllers to take a look at that you'd like me to open up and review and tell you how they are. So I really like the PowerA Gamecube controller that they did, and a few of you actually sent me links to a different Gamecube controller that was getting pretty positive reviews. So I went ahead and ordered it, and it's here. And it is the X-Lean wireless Bluetooth Gamecube controller, and today we're going to take a look at it. So I was trying to figure out why so many people were so interested in this controller, and I think a lot of it has to do with it actually having improvements over that PowerA controller. However, there are of course some cutbacks as well that we'll talk about here, and as I spent more and more time with it, I was actually surprised. While this does appear to be something that would come off of like an AliExpress or like a Chinese wholesale site, it works surprisingly well, and I think it's a pretty good alternative, and it's actually usually cheaper than the PowerA controller, and it has some pretty cool features to it. So we're going to check all of that out today, and if you enjoy the video, make sure you guys are liking it and get subscribed as we go through a ton more accessories for the Switch, and we're even going to work a little bit on a PS4 controller coming up as well. So let's start with unboxing the X-Lean Gamecube Bluetooth controller. It has two different variants. This is the wireless one. The wired one actually has an audio port on the bottom, so if you guys are curious about that, maybe I'll take a look at that one as well, which would kind of make sense considering this would just plug in and then you would of course have audio, so it's still technically tethered to the system. One thing that's interesting about this though is it seems to act like a wired controller, so maybe they could eventually figure out how to make that work, like audio through this. That would be pretty cool. It has two different colors, has kind of that indigo color and then black, and it does work for the Switch. The PlayStation 3, strangely, I don't really know what that's about, why the PS3, but hey, anyone out there using the PS3, here's a GameCube controller for you, and the PC. Now they even have a little checkbox. They didn't check wireless for whatever reason, but I got it off Amazon, so maybe they ripped it off the shelf and threw it in a box and got it to me in a day. This does need a dongle that plugs into the side of your dock, or as they say, a USB adapter, like a hub you can use to connect several of them. That'll work fine as well, and then you can also use it in wired mode. So let's go ahead and open the X-Lean up here. There are some cables and instructions here, some of which we're going to take a quick look at. It also has a little guy here that I think is for hitting the reset button, and then a very large manual that you can read through because it does have a few little functions to it that you might have a hard time with otherwise. It does come with a braided, that's right, actually a braided, yeah, USB Type-C cable. I was a little shocked to see it was braided. That's actually pretty cool. That's higher quality than I'm used to with these kind of controllers, so it doesn't tangle easily. Whereas you have non-braided ones, they can tangle up all easy on you and everything, and they'll crimp. This is a bit easier to handle and use. The one issue I don't really like as much is it's a right angle connector. I'm not a big fan of the right angle. I prefer the cable just comes straight out of the controller, but that's what they went with. Fairly short cable, by the way. It's not super long. You're not going to be sitting across your living room with it, but I would suspect most people would be using this simply to charge the controller. That's right, charge the controller, because it does have a built-in battery. You're not using AA's like the PowerA or anything. It's all built in, and then you have a USB Type-C port on the top where it plugs in. I also noticed that the plug was it's kind of snug, like it's actually kind of hard to get out of there. It's in there pretty good, which I guess for some isn't a bad thing. Man, the thing about this, the reason I don't like this is because you can already kind of see, right? Like you're playing and then you might hit it. It's definitely in the way more so than if it came straight out. No clue why this is a right angle. Maybe somebody can let me know in the comments why they would go with this. I don't know if it's cheaper or who knows, but not a big fan of that. However, I guess if you have a USB-C cable, which if you have a Switch, you probably have a USB-C cable at this point, you can technically plug whatever you want in to charge it. It should even work on like a portable battery bank. Now, looking around the controller, the plastics are good, like surprisingly good. The analog stick is the part that surprises me the most. This is so close to a GameCube analog stick, like more so than the PowerA controller. I'm honestly a bit surprised when it comes down to that. I mean, this whole controller with what you're seeing is $40. So not too bad actually when it comes to that. This is good. The D-pad could be a bit better. I actually like the D-pad more on the PowerA controller because it's more rubberized and it actually has more space to press. So I think it actually is easier to use than this guy, which is much smaller. However, the C-stick here is much better. It's wider, it's easier to kind of grip up. They do all click, so this will work fully as a Switch controller across the board, although of course some buttons will be in weird places, so you'll have to deal with that. And then of course we have left bumper, right bumper up here, and then R and L, or you know, ZL, ZR. These do not pretend to be analog triggers. I actually kind of like that. If you're not going to be an analog trigger, I don't know why you pretend to be one for just the sake of feel. That's something that PowerA has done with theirs, where the trigger will go all the way down before it presses. This, they don't even mess around. It's just click. You know, you just click. You can feel it right away. It doesn't have that long travel that the PowerA one has. Functionality-wise, it does have rumble, has motion controls and everything. It does not have like Amiibo support with NFC. I don't usually expect that out of third-party controllers anyway, but this does not have that. It does have a turbo button, which is pretty easy to use, where you press the little T here, and then you press the button you want. You can also play around with the frequency of how fast you want it to press, as in, do you want it to press 20 times a second? Because that's an option. You would press T, and then you press plus or minus to go up and down in the frequency range. And then it does have the blue buttons down here that will actually tell you which player you are here, where it simply connects to the dongle that is this little guy here. It's a very small dongle, which is might be a kind of tough because it's pretty easy to lose, right? Like, that's not exactly easy to keep track of. However, if it just stays in your dock, it's very low profile and it almost blends in. It's kind of hard to see. So that's actually a nice thing to have there. Overall, with my time, I've been pretty happy with it. It takes about 2 hours to charge, and they're quoting about 15 hours. I have not had to charge this thing yet. So, so far, so good there. And overall, it's actually pretty cool. I have not actually opened it yet, though, so I figure we could go ahead and do that here and see what's inside. But first, let's hear a little bit from our sponsor for the video, Squarespace. All right, look, building a website can be very intimidating, and it can be kind of hard to figure out how to even get started. That's where Squarespace comes in, and with their all-in-one platform that lets you go from picking out your domain to building a fully featured site using entire templates. You can use video backgrounds to set your site apart and view where your visitors are coming from with a full traffic overview. Search engine optimization is even made easier with no additional plugins needed. During my ongoing struggles with a certain game's localization, I realized everything on the internet is taken seriously, so I had no choice. There we go. Now we wait. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spawnwave to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So I've been pretty curious to see what's actually in this thing. I've been holding off opening it until now, just so we can kind of look through it together. Same typical kind of cheaper black screws that I usually see from like knockoff controllers and stuff that I've ordered from like Chinese wholesale sites and everything, but they get the job done, I guess. Same shell that we're used to with a GameCube controller, and to be honest, from what I've used with this, with everything feeling pretty good, the buttons having good travel, they're not super mushy or anything, I kind of figure it's going to be a pretty straightforward process inside, but only a couple of Phillips head screws on the bottom here, and we can find out. All right, so we have several of the Phillips head screws out of the bottom, and this guy actually lifts off. It was clipped, like it actually had some clips to it, which is good because that does make it feel like it's secured much better. This blue light's been on this whole time, by the way. I think it's actually still synced up to the dongle, but we'll unplug the battery anyway when we check it out, so it's not a big deal there. They've retained the same spot for the rumble motor as we would expect right here behind it. That's why you always had that bump on the GameCube controller on the back, because that's where your rumble motor was, which is right here. All held in with plastic too, which is good. We have our own board here for the C-stick as we would expect. It is wired straight up. It's not a plug-in. And I think the battery is actually underneath of this guy here, so we'll pull this off and we can see how large this battery is that apparently gets 15 hours. Oh, one other thing with the back, remember how I told you how the shoulder buttons back here, these larger ones here, didn't feel like they would travel much and they just kind of clicked in. It seems like they did that on purpose with these very large nubs that actually add a little bit of height to it, so the press doesn't have to be as long. So they purposely eliminated that analog press, and you really don't need it because nothing is actually happening here that would signal for an analog. The way they would do that with the GameCube controller, by the way, is, I think I've shown you this before, they had like a switch that would go down with it and then it would crash into the board here. So something was pressing, that told the GameCube that you were slowly pushing the analog stick down, and then it would crash in down here to make that final click that you would always feel at the bottom. So the battery's a little guy. It's this little guy right here. It's a 380 milliamp hour battery, and I guess they're getting their time out of it. They're 15 hours of play. Like I said, I haven't had to charge it since I first got it when I just left it plugged in, and it's lasted me probably 5 hours or so, I would say. So it's definitely has some battery life to it. I haven't tested it fully, but they claim that much. I do question it on that size battery, but I can at least say I haven't had to charge it just yet. I will say, looking over this, it is definitely built like a cheaper controller inside. However, they've done a good job disguising that kind of with the plastics that they've used on the outside. Although I don't like the D-pad as much, but the C-stick is good. Just looking at it, everything is soldered to the board, everything is wired, nothing is modular, and that's kind of an issue, and for the most part tells us that it was built with budget in mind. The battery doesn't even unplug, it's all soldered in. It's all pretty much one piece all the way around, including, it looks like even, yeah, the D-pad is also soldered to the board. So everything just kind of rips out of there all at once. It's definitely built to save some money. Now, being built to save money isn't inherently a bad thing. It just means they wanted to cut some corners and make it a bit cheaper than the competition, which they seem to have succeeded with PowerA being a bit more expensive. However, I do think PowerA's is built better inside, like inside the controller, but this one just feels very, very good. And I do like the fact that a battery is built into it, whereas, of course, it's not on the PowerA. You need AA still. That's something I would like PowerA to, I guess, to expand on, is at least offer one that has a built-in battery, because I know some people like AA's, but the vast majority of people like just plugging in their controller and not even thinking about having to go buy AA batteries. Otherwise, though, I'm going to finish putting this together and give you guys my final thoughts. So I have to at least give it to Xlean for building a fairly solid alternative to the PowerA GameCube controller, or even just the Nintendo, I guess, just GameCube controller in general, if you want like a wireless option that doesn't have to take AA's. However, you're going to also have to decide if things like the D-pad not being as good on this one as it is on the PowerA, for example, or the fact that this one cannot wake up the Switch and this one can, which still kind of annoys me that we get, you know, controllers that do that. Is a deal breaker for you. However, for being a bit cheaper and having the added functionality, the turbo button, I actually think it's not a bad controller to own if you want a GameCube controller for your Switch. But let me know what you guys think about this one, or if you've picked it up and how it's been treating you. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.